Hello, folks, and welcome to the February issue of the ClusterAPI Node Bootstrapping Working Group. We were on and off last year with varying attendance, trying to establish kind of a core team, taking care of things. If you see this and if you want to participate in helping us to abstract Bootstrap information for nodes, then please join the meetings and check the agenda. We're a part of ClusterAPI, which is part of Kubernetes, which is part of the CNCF, and as such, we adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically just means please be nice to each other, treat others the same way you'd want to be treated, and yeah, if you want to say something and someone doesn't stop talking, like me right now, raise your hand to make sure you get room. All right. With that said, Happy New Year, everybody. It's the first round that we have this year. I hope the New Year's Eve went well for all of you folks. And starting with the check-in. I'll say hi, everybody. Miku, you want to start? Say like 2 words about yourself and then pick the next person.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Elmiko or Mike or Michael, I guess, if you want. I work for Red Hat. I do a lot of cloud infrastructure and auto scaling stuff. And I'm really curious about if we can make this low-level bootstrapping a little bit better. So yeah, that's why I'm here. And I'll pass it over to Ali J.
Hi everyone, so Alice Alice. Timothy. So I'm from Red Hat, from the same team as Timothy from CoreOS team, and we are working on confidential clusters. That's why we have tried to create worker nodes, CoreOS worker nodes with ClusterAPI, but we have basically faced the problem that ClusterAPI only supports Ignition version 2, and that's the reason why we're here.
You can pick the next one.
Oh, Mathieu.
Um,
Mathieu.
yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Mathieu. I work as a Flatcar engineer in the Flatcar project, and I've been involved quite a lot on the Ignition support and V2 and V3 support on Flatcar. We maintain backward compatibilities between V2 and V3. And I've been involved on ClusterAPI as well. So that's what I'm super interested to see where it goes here on this topic. What about you, Timothée?
Hey everyone, I'm Timothée. I'm Timothée Ravier. I work at Red Hat on the Chorus team, and yes, we are interested in CAPI for deploying clusters, Fedora Chorus clusters upstream, and then everything downstream, and especially in moving forward the Ignition support in CAPI because nobody else is using Ignition 2 anymore. Even though I know you have Compact, but most people use V3 now. So, did everybody speak already, or should I name someone?
I think Tilo is the last one, maybe?
Go ahead, Tilo.
We had Lena join and then run away. So maybe he joins again. Hi, I'm Tilo. I work as a manager for Microsoft. My team mainly maintains Flatcar Container Linux, and I'm more of a facilitator than an engineer, and you wouldn't want my Go code anyways. I'm a like deep down Linux person, but I try to kind of cross-pollute engineering teams. Timothy knows me from that interesting approach we're doing regarding Azure metadata in Ignition and Afterburn. That's a good example of what I'm aiming for and where I'm trying to help nowadays. And here I'm trying to get the Ignition support in ClusterAPI in a format that is acceptable by upstream. And any help or any other folks that you can pull in that I can support here are very much welcome. Okay. So Mike and Aditya, maybe can you give an overview of where we are with our thinking process? I think we're not ready to implement yet, or do we have an idea of what to build?
I'm not sure if Mike did some homework, but for me, this is it's just too high level. I have been talking with Clémence about that. Maybe you know Clément as well, but so yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have anything new. I can summarize what was done, maybe for the others, but not sure if Mike, you have something new to add.
Yeah, I mean, I can at least give my opinion from what I've looked at so far, and I'm still really, as I know that everyone here knows, this is like a complex issue that the assumption was always cloud in it, right? So it's kind of plumbed through everything, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who finds that a little frustrating. But from looking at what's been done so far, like I don't know that we have a better path forward than looking at the way that the cloud init stuff works right now and seeing if we can factor out like a common library that could be used by both an ignition provider and a cloud init provider. Because I heard what was said about having to duplicate large parts of the logic, and I started to look through it to try to understand like how much duplication is going on there. Now, I'm not at the point where I understand how to extract it yet or how to pull it apart, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be that's probably where we'll get the most value. If we can look at this problem from the notion of, is there a way that we could extract the common parts of what currently exists and get the cloud init provider to use that extracted piece? If that's all stable, then we should be able to start building whatever we want to as a parallel, to that. And it sounds like the work is already like we already understand what needs to be done on that side. It's just the extraction part we need to figure out. So that's kind of where my thinking is today. But that said, I'm still understanding kind of the deeper layers of this, and I've been talking with other people in like the SIG cluster lifecycle just about like how do we I think we need something that kind of goes across Kubernetes, right? We need something that's cross SIG that like people can agree on as a way to do this at the low level. Because I think everyone now just assumes that kubadmin or something like that is going to be the way to go. So yeah, that's my thinking at least.
Yeah, just to summarize maybe for people what was done from Johannes, I think was your colleague from Flatcar. Yeah, so basically started to do an abstraction that actually doesn't touch many places in copy. The problem is that so he basically abstract the provider. It's really on 4 places maximum what he did. But the problem is that basically we need to re-implement the bootstrapper. So basically replace completely the default image with an ignition bootstrapper. And that's basically the part that needs to be rewritten. And I don't know, that part to me sounds like a lot of code that needs to be re-implemented for nothing. Like all the I don't know, all the flags that the bootstrapper has. I mean, there is so much plumbing that I got so frustrated, I have to say, when I start looking at that. It seems a lot of work. So yeah, this is more or less where I stopped. So I agree with Mike. We should try to abstract, but I don't see a way how we can do it inside. I mean, I can see a way how we can do it inside copy, but the problem is what they are asking of developing another completely bootstrapper. It's I don't know, it's a lot of work for I don't know. Uh, and it's also a little bit unfair in my opinion. That was more or less where we stopped last year.
Mike, you have a question?
Sorry, just taking some notes here. So I started to look at the kubedm stuff to try and figure out all the assumptions that are made there. And here's what I can't figure out. And I've been talking to other people around the community to try and understand this a little better. But everyone assumes kubedm, right now. And I guess, there is there is a way to operate kubeadm so that you can get an ignition, configuration out of it. But the question is, do we need like a separate tool? Does there need to be a kubeadm 2 or something? Or does there need to be a cleaner separation in kubeadm so that this can be more accepted? Because I think right now there's this big assumption about kubeadm just producing the cloud init stuff, and I feel like that causes everyone to think about it in a very specific way. And I couldn't tell, like, do we need another kubeadm? Do we need something very specific for ignition, or can we keep just like bolting stuff onto kubeadm? And I don't know that yet, but I'm curious.
So when you say kubeadm, you mean the Cluster API kubeadm provider, right? Not kubeadm itself.
Well, I started to look at kubeadm itself because
Okay.
that's where my investigation kind of led me. It's like, okay, well, yeah, Cluster API just kind of utilizes the kubeadm tool, and as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there's been some work done to take a kubeadm output and have it, be kind of transformed into an ignition config. But this is where I wonder, it's like, does our assumption at the kubeadm layer need to change? Maybe does that tool need to look a little different or something? And I don't have an answer to that yet.
I think that's what Fabrizio wish, and that's what it's very complicated refactoring, but I don't think we actually need that, because what the provider actually does, he has the cloud in it out of a kubeadm, and then he transforms it in ignition. It might not be pretty, but it's much smaller than just. So I mean, we will continue to depend to cloud init, but it's basically kubeadm, then the cloud init part, and then we take cloud init and we transform it into ignition. It's ugly, but it's relatively simple to bump to version 3. But the problem is that instead of pretending to increase the version, they want to completely refactor how kubeadm works. And yeah, that's a problem. It's not something that a newcomer can really do, in my opinion. I don't know if some of you have really, but that was what was very complicated for me. I don't care. To be honest, I don't care about the kubeadm. I just care about ignition v3. But apparently they accepted ignition with the promise that there will be some refactoring in the future. That didn't happen. And that's why they are basically blocking right now version v3. It's a technical depth of copy, basically, that it's affecting us. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to get started. We really need to somebody. I think it's a work that should take 6 months. That's if I have to do some expectation and tell my manager how much time that should take, I would bet at least from 4 to 6 months.
I think Mathieu, then Mike, and then Timothy, if I recall the hands correctly.
Yeah, I will try to be quick. I don't want to sound rude, but whatever. But since the beginning, to me, this idea of having a specific working group on this topic is with just trying to solve engineering political tasks with engineering tasks. And to me, this is not the way to go and to proceed with this. And at the beginning, I remember I said that to Thilo. I said, let's wait and see and where it goes. But it's been 1 year, and I think no progress has been done in this regard on the implementation side, I would say, and even on the design side. We know what to do, but as Alice said, doesn't make any sense, and we try to reinvent the wheel or try to do a bunch of layer of complexity, while Cluster API is already super complex. So I can't imagine all the issues we will see when we have a dedicated ignition external in another kubeadm provider or whatever. So I've been talking with Timothée 2 days ago during the Cloud Native Days, and if I recall correctly, at the beginning, the issue mentioned by Fabrizio about ignition and cluster API was indeed the duplication and the technical update. But the main issue was the ownership. Who owns this code and who maintains it? To me, this is how I understood things, and duplication will come after. But first, it was a question of ownership. So if there is an issue on the Cluster API GitHub repository about ignition, the Cluster API folks doesn't know how to handle it. So that was, to me, the main issue. And if a pull request comes from about the ignition on the ignition side on the Cluster API repository, folks don't know how to review it, and that was big stuff. And so that's why they wanted to remove the ignition part of Cluster API, and they seized this opportunity of the ignition v2 to v3 migration to say, hey, now let's remove it, and we don't need to use it anymore. So what if we try to split now and to find a trade-off? Because as I said, we don't do any progress in more than 1 year on this area. So what if tomorrow we get back to the Cluster API folks, maintainers, and we said, hey, let's meet the halfway, and let's continue for now to maintain the v2 and the v3 on Cluster API, but let's have, I don't know, a GitHub group with Flatcar or Fedora CoreOS reviewers. And every time there is a pull request or an issue in this area, we just involve the ignition folks. And I think that could be a good trade-off. And that's too bad that Leonard didn't join today, because this is something we already do on the Cluster API OpenStack side. Every time there is a Flatcar question or ignition question, Leonard pull me in. So it's just me, but now if we have a dedicated group with Timothée, Alice, me, Thilo, whatever, we have something reliable, and we provide this kind of ownership to the ignition topic. So yeah, that was, sorry, I didn't want to be rude or whatever, or to offend anyone, but yeah, to me that didn't do any progress in the last year. So yeah, I wanted to make this statement.
Yeah, I would give this a so-so chance with upstream, having experienced upstream in the past. But if you want to make that statement or that proposal, I think our next step should be to pop up at next Wednesday's, is it Wednesday? The Cluster API meeting with most, if not all, of the volunteers who want to be in that group, right? So they see by presence alone that here, this is us. You can pull us in, or here's your point of contact. They'll pull in the others. I don't give it high chances, but I get your point. Mike.
Yeah, no, I think what Matthew is saying is really, right on, and I don't think you were being rude at all, Matthew. It stinks that this is a political problem, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to get involved as well, because I do a lot of socializing amongst these groups, and I think this probably just needs to be socialized more and discussed in more places. So that's part of what I've been trying to do. I think that, just to respond to what Matthew was saying there, I think, yeah, if we go back to the upstream and we say, here's a group of people who want to be in the owner's file, who want to own this part of the code, and will step up to maintain it, that's absolutely a good direction to go, right? And that at least keeps us maintaining the code that's there, for now, right? I think for the future, and this is kind of unfortunate given how much work it probably would take, I would want to see cleaner separations between the API boundaries here, right? Because there should be some sort of contract that a bootstrapper can just, adhere to, and then Cluster API keeps working. And this is where the question I was going to ask, and maybe this is for LHA, I was looking at kubeadm, and my understanding right now is that to produce the ignition output, we actually hook into some of the functions where the individual pieces are created for the cloud init. Is that still the way we do it, or are we taking the full cloud init and then parsing that and turning it into an ignition?
Yeah, I think that plus some other additional information that are added on top with some ignition flag.
Okay.
But as far as I understood, yeah, they derive basically ignition from the cloud init. And
'Cause
sorry, Timothy, I didn't want to step
Right.
in.
I'm kind of wondering, like, if there's thinking about kind of the Unix tool philosophy, right? Like we have kubeadm that spits out a cloud in it. Can we just build another tool that takes the cloud in it and spits out an ignition, or is that already the way it works or something? Because that seems like that would be the easiest way to solve
It
this.
is the way how it works
Okay.
today.
Okay, good. Because yeah, like at that point, we should be able just to focus on the ignition part, and it just becomes like a generic piece in the tool chain, I would hope.
Yeah, this is just exactly what I was going to ask, like what exactly the format is. So if my understanding is correctly, we get kubeadm to generate cloud init configs, and then we have some logic in CAPI to take this cloud init config and generate ignition ones.
Plus some other information that we get from the API, and that's what Fabrizio really didn't like.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's a mix and match, but I would say the major part of the ignition, like users, for example, and so on, is derived from the Cloud Init script.
Is that part of ClusterAPI right now, or could we break it out into its own separate? See, like this is what I'm wondering. It's like if we took that part and broke it out into its own separate tool, or I guess in ClusterAPI it's just in its own folder. Yeah, like going back to what Matthew was saying, if we get the owner's files there kind of fixed up so that we can just take over it, right? Then like, is that possible even?
Sorry, guys, I think we need to make a step back because maybe Mike and Tilo can also confirm, but my impression from what Fabrizio said is that they have two maintainers, and Fabrizio is one of them. And the problem is not really ignition. The problem is that they lack maintainer, as every cloud, every open source project. And I don't know, for me, I might sound rude in this case, but it sounded to me like an excuse that they want to block ignition in order to have some work done and some more maintainer. So I totally hear Matthew with the fact that we should own ignition. That was my initial proposal, but I think that's just a consequence. They want to have this they want to see this refactor of the Bootstrap, and they use ignition a little bit like an excuse to have some contributors, some people volunteering. That's a problem. I don't know if you had the same feeling, Mike and Tilo from.
I mean, I think you're probably reading it pretty accurately. Like I'm biased because I've been working with these people for so long, but I think yeah, like they're stressed from maintaining all this stuff, and if they can get an extra maintainer to come in there and help them do the refactor, yeah, that's probably great, right? Like I wish I had time to help them out. Maybe this is one of these things where it's like, and it doesn't help the progress we're trying to make here, right? Because this is just one more roadblock to get done what we want to get done. So yeah, I
No,
don't.
I mean, if I was in the ClusterAPI group, I would volunteer. The problem is that it's such a high in the stack from CoreOS that's a bit complicated. But
Well, right. I could volunteer, but then my manager would get like pissed off at me.
yeah, as usual.
I want to honestly, I want to keep talking with Fabrizio about this too. I want to understand the problem better because maybe there is a way I can help out. I don't know.
I would split this into about 50-50, right? So there is a need for abstraction or separation so the code is cleaner. And the breakage that is caused by ignition for things that have been added to the generic cluster API side, that's a thing. I also second that the development speed of core cluster API is slowed down just because the code is so complicated, right? And that's the second kind of perspective. So the two things I want to take into the cluster API meeting when we're talking about the maintainers. Oh, but let's take a step back and even talk about the second thing before I put it into the agenda. So the idea of having a cloud init to I don't want to say ignition, to have a cloud init to butane transpiler bubbled up a number of times. So that would be a pretty generic thing, and we would probably need to work with kind of predefined patterns, because there are things in Cloud Init that just don't exist in Ignition, like the ability to run arbitrary commands. So you need some kind of facility to, maybe create systemd units for that, which would run the commands on first boot, or, these kind of things. And I would, that gut feeling, I would say this way we could jot out about 60 to 80% of the Cloud Init features and could transpile them to butane YAML. And that would be my kind of long-term roadmap goal for how we tackle the complexity. By having that separate tool, can be a Go library even, which could be reused in ClusterAPI. And I want to put that as a second kind of part of the offer that we approach Core ClusterAPI with. So our story would be, we're 4 maintainer and 1 manager who can go and yell at people. And we're volunteering for a kind of GitHub group or user group to be pinged on all issues related to Ignition. We'll make ourselves pingable on Slack as well. So if a maintainer or contributor deals with the sheer complexity alone, they can pull us in for some help with their work. And that would basically cover both points they address right now. As a short-term strategy, we would like to add Ignition version 3 support and remove version 2 support entirely, basically just replacing it. So the complexity would stay the same. It wouldn't disappear, but it would stay the same. And in the very long term, we're considering having a Cloud Init YAML to butane YAML transpiler, so we can work with that in the ClusterAPI tooling. And we could have it in other places as well. There's this mention of, so I didn't really dive deep into that when we talked about it with Johannan back in the day. But Johannan mentioned it's not just the Bootstrap provider, it's also some other like very foundational thing in ClusterAPI that currently speaks Cloud Init / Ignition that we need to tackle with. And that will basically solve, I don't know what it is. You folks tell me, not a ClusterAPI expert. And that would basically tackle that issue down the road as well. So this is kind of the proposal I would go in with. And also, I mean, we would have a tool that would transpile Cloud Init into butane. That would be awesome in itself, right? Sorry.
No, I think that sounds like that's kind of like what we need at some level, right? And I think to what Matthew is saying in chat, I agree with that. Like, yeah, if we can take a dual approach to this, right, where one team is looking at this like Cloud Init to butane, transpiler, which I'm sure will be useful to a wider community than just us. That can be worked on totally separately. In the meantime, if some of us, and maybe I can volunteer for some of this, I need to understand from Fabrizio more. Maybe we can start to work on the refactor inside of ClusterAPI, and then we'll keep the V2 stuff working in the short term. And when this tool is ready to go, then we start to bring the V3 in using the tool and everything. Or is that too long?
No, I don't think we need to separate that. If we reach an agreement with the core ClusterAPI maintainers that we actively have maintaining the code base, then our very first engagement with the code would be to convert it into V3. That would unblock like a ton of things for folks over at Fedora CoreOS. And I kind of want to have that win for you folks, right? Otherwise, you're just investing and there'll be nothing for you for next month. So I at least want to have it on the table. And also, it's a good argument that the complexity will stay exactly the same. Like, we're not going to make it more complex, right? And also, I mean, ultimately in Flatcar, we're going to get rid of the V2 stuff ourselves. So I think at least for all of our projects, it would be a big win. And for ClusterAPI core, it would be like a 0 something.
But we can't drop V2. If we have to add V3 and support both V2 and V3, right?
Would we? Why?
I mean, if there's people currently using V2, we can't I don't think
Yeah,
we
but
can break it.
people using V2 only use it through Flatcar, and Flatcar supports both on the node level. So it just goes, this looks like V2. Okay, this is V2 for me. Oh wait, this is V3. So I'm gonna interpret it as V3. We have backwards compatibility, but we prefer V3.
Okay.
Yeah, but it works until some limits. If they use the basic cluster API configuration, that would work. But if the user overrides the templates with some container Linux configuration, it would break. But yeah, this is a breaking change. If we want to do from V2 to V3, it has to be communicated and going
Yep.
through the regular stabilization of cluster API. But yeah, I'm fine just dropping V2 to V3, and I would not expect so much breakage here. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it would be interesting to learn.
both.
No, that makes sense. I mean, if you offer your own customized templates, you'll always have to keep up with the development. Also, I believe Ignition support is still feature gated, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
still
it's still feature gated.
it's still
Okay.
experimental.
Okay, so we can
Yeah.
break away then. All right, so yeah, I think given those details, yeah, that sounds like a good plan to me, Tilo.
Nice.
And I think there is even the V3 PR by someone from the community, so we can have it merged tomorrow.
Beautiful. Yeah. All right. Cool. Good stuff.
So what are the next steps? Should we go to the Cluster API meeting next week, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, propose this stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna block my calendar for Wednesday next week, and then we'll have a chat around it. That's okay, cool. Just to make sure, because I have a lot of meetings with folks overseas, right? And this is kind of their preferred slot. So I need to have a placeholder there. Okay. Yeah, sounds like I hope I need to find the right angle with the folks because I entirely understand them. And the kind of issues they're dealing with, and it's not rare in open source projects. And there was this nice little presentation from a former colleague, Marga. She had a keynote at FOSDEM, and she was talking about maintainer burnout. And I don't want those folks, to even feel like they're being pushed in that direction. So I'll take extra care.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, Tilo. Like at this point, yeah, anything we're bringing at this level of a feature or whatever, we need to just volunteer to show up and be like, hey, we're going to continue to maintain this. It's not going to add any cognitive load to the maintainers. So yeah, I think that's a really smart way to take it.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think with a correct code owner's specification, we can even bring some automation for the specific files. So they don't even need to explicitly pull us. So it will ease the work.
That's true for some of the files, but unfortunately, and this is like the code complexity, right? Part of the implementation is right in the main sources, and it goes, is it Ignition, is it Cloud Init, and you find these kind of ifs all over the place. So I get the complexity overhead there, but yeah, I mean, we can definitely do more than we did in the past, and it's great to. This is one of the biggest working group meetings that we ever had, so it's awesome to see that kind of this team size. It's amazing.
Yeah, like I said, I'd like to talk to Fabrizio a little bit more to understand the scope of the refactoring because like I do have some leeway in my schedule. So like if it's something that I think I could probably do, then I could try to start working with Fabrizio to see if I can help out there and just I guess prepare the way for like all the V3 work we want to do and everything.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Then I have we have this kind of structure in the meeting where at the end we just read the to-dos that we found. And then in the next meeting in 2 weeks from now, I'll go through the same to-dos and give an update. I only have one to do, and that's kind of wrapping up the ideas that we phrased in this meeting. Create a sound proposal for core cluster API and then join the cluster API meeting next week. It would be, I know it's late for some of you folks, but it would be amazing if you could be around. It's 6 p.m. UTC. Just to demonstrate that we actually mean it, and that we are around. And if you folks find some more people in the Fedora CoreOS project interested in dabbling with those issues once or twice a month, here's a chance. And if you find a good GSOC student to build that transpiler tool, that would be amazing as well. Cool. Anything else you folks want to share?
You read my mind about the GSOC.
Right? It's obvious.
GSOC or Outreachy or something. Right?
The GSOC deadlines are just up. They just ended a few days ago. So there we go. But anyways.
Outreach is a little bit later, I think. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, would be cool.
I think Outreach is a bit later. But yeah, GSOC, you're right. I completely forgot.
This has Go and YAML in it, and I mean you can validate both the inputs and the outputs because that validation already exists. So I think it's well charted out.
Yeah, this like I said, I'll talk with Fabrizio and Stefan, and if there's a way that we could scope this in a manner that it could be turned into an internship kind of thing, like yeah, it's a perfect opportunity for someone to get into the code. I just like we know this stuff is strewn all throughout the cluster API base. So like I'm still trying to understand, can we actually describe the problem in a way where we could hand it to someone and say, okay, here's like an internship project to work on or something.
If you make it generic enough, we could even leave out cluster API entirely, right?
And just, yeah, right. It's just a refactoring at some level. That's the main thing that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Anything else you folks want to talk about? Nice. I have my big two. Looking forward to seeing you in the Cluster API meeting next week. And thank you for being here and for helping with this. It's very much appreciated.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Bye, folks.
Bye,
one
guys.
question. Matthew mentioned KubeCon. Is anybody else here coming to KubeCon? Okay, cool. I'll be there as well. So I guess we can all meet up and maybe grab a beer.
Yeah, actually, it's a good chance. Maybe also with other cluster API folks, we can ask maybe next week who is going to be there.
Yeah, we have a booth in the Project Pavilion. We're there all afternoons. You just drop by, and then you'll find us every day.
All right, cool. I expect some good swag.
Yes, we have swag.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Bye, guys.